imp aim I've been working on. I've added a hit scan weapon to the puppet, and it works pretty nicely, and it's pretty much accurate. And it has a number of nice features. It can detect sort of what it's hitting, and either emit a ricochet effect or a blood effect. It has a muzzle flash on the hand, and there are bullet holes that are nicely aligned to the surface and pretty much right on there. And it also has a force feedback thing, so it pushes what it hits if it's allowed to. And it has a health manager. You can see it's our health modifier. It's taking all those guys. It also detects. I have it sort of detecting headshots right now and bumping up the damage. So yeah, that's it. I'll also give you a little. If anyone's interested, I'll do a little demonstration on how you can use a laser scope, the outputs from a laser scope, to power basically all of these effects and put them in the right spots. So, looking at the puppet, I'll just give you a quick demo I've set up here. I'm using the puppet's forearm for this. But basically you'll have a laser scope, and a lot of these effects are powered by emitters. The muzzle flash, the bullet holes, and the like ricochet effect are powered by emitters. The health modification and the force effect are in a helper block, which is also sort of powered by the laser scope. It gets the position that the laser scope hits and moves the helper block to that position at all the time, and it looks back at where it's being shot from, and you can emit the health and the force effect in a zone sort of right at where the hit scan weapon is impacting. I'll show you that at the end. But the rest of the effects are powered by emitters, and I'll just show you how you can use the output of a laser scope to orient and position a sculpture and also give it a direction if there's movement involved. So first of all, I'll just show you like a basic positioning. I have this wired to a button that's going to emit an object, and the simplest thing you can do, you don't even really need a combiner for this, is you take, on the third page, there is something called hit position, and you can output that directly to the emitter's scene space transform. That tells it where you want to emit the object. And in a simple case, you can just actually output that directly. So I can just output from the hit position into the scene space transform. And what am I emitting? Currently I am emitting this cone. That's fine. So this cone with the point going up is going to be emitted when I press the button. So if I look in my scene, I think I've got a little bit of movement on there actually. It's a little bit of speed, so I'll take the speed to 0 for now. So you can see you emit a cone at the location that I'm pointing. So that's one thing you can do. You can also orient the sculpture according to the surface you hit. This is important for bullet holes. And for that, we're going to use the scene. You just still use the scene space transform, but we're going to take the hit surface orientation on the third page of the laser scope, and it's going to tell you the surface it hit, and we're going to pass that to the orientation of a combiner. Bring yourself in a combiner, and you set it to transform. That gives you a position, an orientation, and also a scale, which you might find useful. So you can put the position into the position part, hit and pass that now to the scene space transform of your emitter. And then you will have the points coming out in the floor, and when I put it on the wall, I can see that the points are now coming out on the wall. So that's basically correct, and it's worth noting, okay, I've got the sculpture with the point up, and for the wall the point is going to come out. So the hit surface orientation output of this laser pointer is actually the arrow that's pointing out of the surface you're hitting. It's like the normal to that surface. Yeah, that's pretty much it. That's how you can use that laser pointer. There's a scale option as well on the combiner, so if you wanted to, you could put just a single number, a scalar value into there. This is 2.3, and you can see that when I emit now, it's twice as big, or 2.3 times as big. There's something to note that's kind of important when you're using these direct coordinates into the emitter, that the object that's emitted, it uses the sculpture coordinate system of the object. So if I rotate this object now in scene space, you'll see that it doesn't make a difference. It's still point out. And even if I re-emit that object, if I undo this by clicking triangle and then re-emit it, I can see it's still point out. So it doesn't matter how you rotate the object in scene space, it's going to stay the way it was in the sculpture. I could go into the sculpture editor and I could actually rotate it in here and get, in that case it will actually work. But I've also changed the position a little bit, so you have to be a little careful. I could re-emit it now and it would re-correct that, but in general my advice would be, if you're going to be using these direct coordinate systems, make your sculpture in the sculpture space sort of correct the first time you want it. So I'm actually going to, yeah, sure, I'll just remake the cone because that's probably simplest. So I'm actually going to make it the opposite direction this time. I'm going to have it pointing down, and I'll just pop a cone in there. And now I'll ask the emitter to emit that cone, which is pointing down, and we should get, yeah, the cone is now stabbed into the surface. And yeah, so it takes whatever surface you're using. So on the cone here, you can see if I doesn't want to export on that cone. Not sure. Oh, I guess I have this marked as it's shooting right through it for some reason. I think this is marked as invisible for the laser pointer. But anyway, it's in most cases, if you're using normal sculptures, it'll emit, you know, oriented to the surface you're outputting on. And that again is the arrow coming out of that surface. So that's how you can use those to position things. That's most important, of course, for all the effects need their positioning, but especially bullet holes need to be oriented. And again, we're going to be this spike is going to be stabbing into the surface when we orient it just directly like that. So you want to draw your effects in that plane the first time. So when I draw a bullet hole, I would draw it facing down. That way when I transform it, it is the correct location. So make your sculptures, make yourself like a test cone, and then make your sculptures in the correct orientation when you make them. That way when you pass them through this emitter, your sculptures or your artwork in the correct orientation. That way you just need to pass them straight through the emitter and they will show up in the right spot. We can also control the direction of these objects. I'm going to make this not collidable and give it no gravity, so I can give it a speed. If I give this emitter a bit of a speed, I can see the arrow gizmo appears where my sculpture is being emitted way over there. But I'm not going to use the gizmo to give it a speed. I'm just going to use this last page of the tweak menu, and I'm going to pass it the hit surface orientation directly into the scene space direction. So direction is important for the movement of the object. This is only important for the placement of the object, even though we're using the hit surface orientation for both. So doing that, you can see that the object will come out of the wall. The arrow is pointing out of the wall, and it pops out that way. So that's what I use for the little impact effects that pop out of the the ground. And if the cone, you can see it emits. Oh yeah, the cone doesn't work. You can see on the circle, it emits wherever I'm hovering over. It can pop out along any radial there. That's pretty much it. There's also another little trick that I need for my thing, because I don't my laser pointer is looking at a tag. Yours might be just directed somewhere down the barrel of a gun or somewhere in the sculpture space. So to get the direction from the that I'm looking at from this laser scope, I actually use a rotator gadget that has no speed and no strength, but it has an input for target position and an output for scene space direction. So if I wanted to ever use the direction I'm pointing the laser scope, the direction the laser scope is pointing, I pass the hits position through a lookout rotator, and it could give me the direction back. So I could take this direction, scene space direction here, and I could use that, I guess, for the direction of the emitted object. It's not, that wouldn't be super exciting. I use it for the muzzle flash. I emit the muzzle flash in that direction. But in this case, it would just start an object moving in the direction, I think, that I hit. So there it passes through that sculpture. I could shoot here, and it emits there, and it emits in the direction I'm pointing. So that's just how you would get all of the stuff from the laser scope and use it with emitters. That's pretty much it. So you have the hit position and the hit direction, and if you need the direction that the laser scope is pointing, you can pass the hit position through a lookout rotator and get the direction out. Sorry, this second output on the laser scope is the hit surface orientation. So together you can use all those things either to position your object correctly or make it move in the correct direction. And I use all of them in different ways for each effect, really. For the muzzle flash, for the bullet hole, and for the little pop-up effect, I use all of those things. The other thing that's used is the hit position to position the helper box. I output the hit position as on a wireless transmitter, and then I pick it up in a helper box that sticks on that position with a maximum speed and strength follower. So hopefully it's on that position in time, and I use that. So now he's positioned there. He looks back at where the weapon's pointing, and then I can, when I've registered a hit, when I've decided that you have hit the enemy, I can put out a health modifier. This I kind of got going through a little bit. I mean, if there's someone standing right behind the impact point, you could maybe do them too. I was experimenting with kind of shooting through targets. And I also put a force applier in the same thing. The force applier is pointing backwards, and I know that should be correct because this box is supposed to be looking at the gun where I'm pointing. So that's pretty much it. That's the basics of how those effects are achieved. I'll just show you how I recommend putting your effects in sculptures. These are the actual effects I used. This is just the muzzle flash, and if I turn off style, you can see that I've actually just used spheres, little spheres. The muzzle flash comes out as a glowing sphere for 0.1 seconds. This is the bullet hole. It's just a little painting. I think I used this one a few times, but I was very careful to paint it along the floor so that it would be oriented properly. And the other two effects are similar. There's another sphere for the impact effect that pops out of the ground. So it shoots out of the ground for 0.1 seconds, and then the emitter destroys it. And this is a blood splatter effect. If I put these back on, they sort of look like blood splatter effects. And if I turn off studio lighting, you can sort of see that I've applied a bunch of, glow and effects to these very simple sculptures. Like if I look at the tweak menu of the sculpture, I've turned up glow on this one and really cranked up all the looseness and stuff, and then you just sort of play with these effects until until it kind of looks like something like maybe you want, or maybe it's something different. This was originally going to be a puff of smoke, and it kind of turned into a smoke ricochet. Because I'm positioning these all carefully, especially the bullet hole and I guess all the impact effects, I put the effects in frames. I find when you're emitting things, especially artwork, if it's this painting, you'll never get the center just right because the boundaries of the artwork are always a little fluid. You know, there's always little things you can't see that affect the boundaries. So I make a frame. You can make them very quickly by giving yourself a high grid setting and just making a large cube, however big you want. However the maximum size of your effect is going to be, stamp it down, switch to negative mode, stamp a couple holes in it so you can see the middle. Sometimes I leave the floor in, and then put a very tiny one right in the center so you know where the center is. And that's it. You sort of have a frame that you can work inside. You can add any effects you'd add to this group. You'd make this a group, add the effects to the group, and center them around the center here. And then for the bullet hole, you know, I moved it up and down carefully until it was as close to exactly on the wall as possible. And the other effects too. You can, you know, it's nice to have them in the frame because if you need to just adjust them a little bit, or you want them to come out a little bit more from the surface, you can move them within the group of the frame, and the effect will always put the center of the frame, you know, where you want it, and the actual effect can be positioned within the frame exactly where you want it. So that's a handy tip I got from one of the many great YouTube tutorials out there. And that's pretty much it. So that's how I did my effects. And if you want to see exactly how my laser scopes are working, it's just in here. This is the main laser scope that should decide whether it's going to hit or not. Here's the fire button is here, and the first thing it does is a muzzle flash. So the muzzle flash has a direction that I'm getting from this lookout rotator, how I showed you in the beginning. I want it emitting this in the direction I'm pointing. So that's how I do that. And it emits it for 0.1 seconds and sends a object just emitted. This decides whether it's a friend or foe, and I can choose the effect on there. There's either this is the impact effect that pops up out of the ground. Again, that just emits for 0.1 seconds, and I give it for its direction, I pass it the hit surface orientation. I want it to come up out of the ground. For its position, I just give it the output from this combiner. It's a sphere, so the rotation of it doesn't really matter, but whatever. If it did, I got it. Same with this one. This is finally the bullet hole, and this uses the scene space transform, but it has no movement, so I don't need a direction for it. But using this makes sure that it's going to be oriented properly. That's pretty much it as far as using the effects go. I have a couple other laser pointers in here that just have, they're clones of this one. They come from the same spot, but they detect different things. This tries to detect if it's a foe, and this one detects if it is a head. And I'm using tags for all this, so you're kind of limited by the number of tags you have as to you know, the number of surface effects or impact effects you can have. But I think there's more than enough. To do the comparison, I check if the distance to my main reticle is the same as the distance to the foe. That way I know that it's right on top of it. Otherwise, originally I had it just checking if there was a foe there, and it can actually look through walls and see the foe behind the wall because the laser pointer ignores it. So I check the distance. You look at the hit distance and say if you have equal hit distances, I know that I'm over a foe, and I know where to shoot it. If the foe is behind, it'll have a greater distance, and this won't be equal. That's pretty much it. For the headshot, I just trigger a keyframe that modifies the health and the reticle, makes it red. But that's pretty much it. So using that, you can get, I think, a complete sort of hit scan solution, and any additional effects that you want should be easy to put in. You can put them in if they're being emitted or anything like that. You can put them directly in the weapon. If they're kind of like health modification or other gadgets, you can put them in that helper block and know that you're going to be emitting exactly in that location, whatever zone you want to emit, whether it's a health modifier or anything else. Also, just to note, I also put a little bit of fog in the impact effects and in the blood splatter effects. Fog's kind of nice because it lingers a little bit after the effect. You can shoot the effect out and the fog kind of sticks around like dust a little bit. That's pretty much it. Just wanted to give you a little demo. There's something else kind of cool that if you look at if I turn this text displayer on, it gives me another reticle, and you can actually see there's a little red reticle behind it, and that actually shows you where you're actually aiming. So because my camera position is different from the location where the attack is coming from, the arm, I actually have two locations. The green one is where I'm the user interface, where I'm gyroing around the screen, and the red one where I'm actually going to hit. So here, that green dot is not visible from the puppet location, so it's actually going to hit the red dot, and that's just kind of showing you what's actually happening. Whether that's going to, necessary or you want that, I'm not sure. You can easily leave it out, and it's pretty obvious what's happening, but it's kind of neat to also see explicitly that I don't have line of sight from the hand to where I want to aim. I can never hit that part of the wall from here. So that's pretty much it. Hope that was maybe helpful in any way, and talk to you later. Thank you to everyone in the community that's been so helpful to me and for making the YouTube videos and all that. Take care.